We've had a lot of events in this auditorium since I've been here and over the past 10 years, but I don't think I recall ever seeing it this packed. So welcome, and for a great cause. Thank you for joining us for the Dean Robb Annual Public Interest Lecture. My name is Jocelyn Benson. I am the Dean of Wayne State University Law School, and this annual lecture is intended to inspire our legal community, our law students, public interest organizations, and everyday citizens to become more active in public service and public interest law. We here at the law school see the law as a tool for service, and we try every day to do everything we can to train the next generation of advocates for justice. So as we lead the charge to train that next generation, we are paying close attention to what we can do to train civil rights advocates to follow in the footsteps of those like our distinguished speaker tonight, and of course, like Dean Robb himself. So this is the third installment of the lecture series, and it brings us to one of the most influential civil rights attorneys in the United States, Dees, who's joining us tonight. We have many great, generous sponsors and many people who've worked very hard to make tonight happen, and I'm happy to begin by introducing Associate Director of the Damon J. Keith Center for Civil Rights at Wayne Law, Viola, who will provide some welcoming remarks on behalf of the center. Viola.
Thank you, Dean Benson. One of the privileges of working at the Damon J. Keith Center for Civil Rights here at Wayne Law is that we are never far from incredible inspiration. Every day it's here. We've got Peter Hammer directing the center, we've got Judge Keith's name over the door, and we have Dean Benson, who is an endless source of vision and strategy as far as what Wayne Law can be. And tonight is one of those occasions where we are so close to inspiration. It's here in the room with us. I think anyone who's a lawyer, or like my poor husband who's married to a lawyer, can tell you that sometimes the law can be a cynical place to be. It can be a hard endeavor, especially for those of us who are committed to public justice and public interest. And we need regular inspiration. We need to be infused and invigorated and reawakened to what is possible with the law. The Southern Poverty Law Center does that again and again and again through the leadership of Dees. And on behalf of the Damon J. Keith Center, thank you so much for what you do and for the inspiration that you will be with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Viola, and I also want to give a special thanks to the director and founder of the Keith Center, Peter Hammer, who many of you know well and is here with us tonight. And also to Marty Knight, who is here. I see Peter there in the back. Marty Knight, who is here. She's worked tirelessly to bring this event to fruition. So the entire Keith Center staff has really gone above and beyond tonight in making this event a success. So thank you to all of you. In addition to our great Keith Center leadership and team, this event is made possible to our generous sponsors and legal community, whose names you see up here: Pitt McGahee, Palmers and Rivers. Of course, one of the longest-standing sponsors of this event, the law offices of Deborah Gordon, Summer Schwartz, McKean & Associates, Goodman and Hurwitz, Dimon Fagan, Johnson Law, and Goodman and Callahar. Thank you all to our generous sponsors for making this evening a reality. Invite Michael Pitt, who is a Wayne Law alum, class of 1974, and is managing partner at the law firm Pitt McGahee, Palmer and Rivers in Royal Oak, and one of our great local civil rights attorneys and heroes. A continued sponsor of this lecture, I'd like to invite Michael up here to provide a few remarks on behalf of our sponsors. Michael.
Thank you, Jocelyn, and special thanks to my good friend Dean Robb, who's been inspiration to me. And when we conceived of this project, Dean was forefront, and we just love Dean so much, and we're so happy to be able to honor him in this fashion. So, and Dean, I can't tell you what you've done for me over the years, and
fortunate tonight to have with us Arthur Bryant, who's the chairman of the Public Justice Foundation, an organization that's been a tremendous supporter of this event since its inception. Arthur, there you go.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to give you a little background and history about how this came to be. And I'll go back a few years. In 1980, Ralph Nader came to the Michigan Trial Lawyers Association's annual convention and gave a speech where he said, "You all do a fair amount in the world to make the world a better place. You get defective products off the market. You get compensation for the injured. You hold wrongdoers accountable. But you don't do half as much as you should do." Which Ralph said to everybody all the time about everything. And he said, "You all know, in every single one of your practices, you have cases that come in the door that's an absolute outrage, and that none of you will take because the case won't make any money. You need to form an organization, the central purpose of which is to use your skills and your skills and your resources to take on those cases. Cases that need to be brought because of the public interest issues involved, and that no one's going to take on to make money." And in that audience was Dean Robb. And he got inspired with a handful of other people. And by 1982, Trial Lawyers for Public Justice had opened its doors. It's now called Public Justice. But Dean organized over 250 lawyers to get us to open the doors. I joined the organization as the sole staff attorney in 1984. 3 years later, the executive director came to me. He told me he was leaving to go to private practice. The office manager was going with him. The woman who helped him with fundraising and communications was going to graduate school, and good luck. And I became the executive director in 1987. And now we've grown from less than 25 annual members, an annual budget of less than $250,000, one of the smallest dockets in the country, to now we have an annual budget over $5.3 million. We have over 2,500 members around the country. We have, in the last 30 years, the broadest range of cutting-edge, high-impact cases of any organization in the country. So there are groups that do civil rights, or workers' rights, or consumer rights, or access to the courts, or environmental protection, or product safety. We are the only group that does all of it and more. And the way we do it, I guess there are two important pieces. One is we do it by calling on plaintiffs' lawyers all around the country to work on these cases because of the good they'll do, whether or not they'll make any money. And the way we can do that, whether or not they'll make any money, is by membership dues. Just like the Southern Poverty Law Center, we don't take on cases to make money. We take on cases to right wrongs and do good. So I'm thrilled that Morris is here to speak in honor of Dean to finish the history. Dean was our president when I was drawn to the organization. The very first case that went to trial with Dean as the co-lead counsel was the Liuzzo case. When I became, and we created a Trial Lawyer of the Year award. But in keeping with who we are and what we're about, it was not about who made the most money. It was about the case that made the biggest difference to the public interest in the last year. So surprise, surprise, in 1987, when I became the executive director, the winner of the Trial Lawyer of the Year award was Dees. And Morris, has been a finalist ever since, years after years. I expect it'll be this year after he's told me about the case he just won, but we will see. And I can do unabashedly what he won't do up here, which is to say, if you're not a member of both of our organizations, please join us. Don't pay us for all the bills. But I just want to say it's an honor to be here, and it's certainly an honor to be here with Morris. Thank you very much.
We will now hear from Governor Gary Pollard, the chairman of the Wayne State Board of Governors. Governor Pollard was elected to the Board of Governors in 2008. He's a native Detroiter, and he serves on various community boards, including the Detroit River International Crossing Advisory Council. Governor Pollard.
Thank you, Dean Vincent. Good afternoon. On behalf of the Wayne State University Board of Governors, I am delighted to be here with you this afternoon to welcome you to this evening's special lecture by Morris Dees of the Southern Poverty Law Firm. Tonight's lecture series named for longtime activist and civil rights attorney, Dean A. Robb, whom I am proud to say is a graduate of Wayne Law. I just want to say, hear that. It's intended to inspire law students, attorneys, public interest groups, and everyday citizens to become more active in public service and public interest law. I am sure tonight's speaker will do just that. The university is proud to support programs like the Dean Robb Lecture Series because they inspire all of us to aim higher in our own work life, in our vision of equality for the world, and the role we play in our own community's well-being. Tonight's speaker knows much about fighting for justice. I am in awe of the work that Mr. Dees and the Southern Poverty Law Center have done to fight hate and bigotry, to seek justice that we all hold dear. It is especially fitting that tonight's lecture series and its keynote speakers are part of the same week that we've celebrated and honored Mrs. Viola Liuzzo with a posthumous honorary degree for the important contributions and sacrifice she made personally in the fight for justice. I know Mr. Dees will be speaking about her this evening, and the member of Mrs. Liuzzo's family are here with us as well. I know tonight will be we will hear an enlightening discussion. So, let's walk the path to change together. Thank you again. Welcome to Wayne State University.
I also want to recognize two distinguished members of our Board of Governors here tonight, Sandy Hughes O'Brien and Governor Kimberly Trent. And I want to give a special shout out to Governor Trent, who has championed and spearheaded the effort to give an honorary degree to Viola Liuzzo from this university. So and we have one more thing to get to, but I want to thank the several dignitaries also who joined the members of the Board of Governors here tonight, including Federal Judge Linda Parker and Federal Judge Ava Cohn, who are with us this evening. So thank you for joining us. We have an additional dignitary, State Senator Coleman Young is here. Where's Senator Young? I maybe towards the end, go ahead, do you just want to?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just wanted to say, Mr. Dees, first of all, Dean Robb, I'm sorry. If I knew you were going to be here, I would have had a tribute for you too, so into the mail, I apologize. First of all, I just wanted to say to Mr. Dees personally, thank you so much for all that you've done. There's a quote from a great man that once says that man should not aspire to stay on top of the world, but stoop down and lift mankind higher. And sir, that is what you've done. I just want to say thank you for your work. Every time I go to a bathroom, I don't have to worry about whether it says white or colored. Every time I go to a school, it's not separate but equal. Every time I go to a bakery chef, I don't have to worry about them serving me because of the color of my skin. I can be anything I want to be because of the content of my character, not because of my race, and that's because of the work that you have done. So I just want to say thank you so much. Thank you for lifting while you climb. Continue in your good work. And I just want to say from my generation to yours, thank you, because if it had not been for your sacrifice, I would not be a state senator. I would not be where I am today. So thank you and God bless you. As a son of Detroit, I also want to say for the work that my father has done as the first and longest serving mayor of the city of Detroit, thank you so much for what you've done and God bless you so much.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. This has been the capital capstone of a really tremendous weekend, as Arthur mentioned. And of course, when I first learned about Dean Robb, it was through the stories of how he had stood and fought for the Liuzzo family to help them seek justice at a time when others had turned their backs. And I do want to just, we've had a number of events over the past few days that have honored Viola Liuzzo's memory. We've given her an honorary degree at the university. We've established a scholarship in her name at the nursing school. We've dedicated an area in our courtyard here at the law school in her honor with a plaque that I encourage all of you to see before you leave tonight. But in addition to that, I do want to recognize 4 very special people who have joined us this evening and who I've been fortunate enough to get to know throughout this weekend, and who I consider great friends and new friends and hopefully future collaborators. And that is the Liuzzo family. We have Penny, Mary, Tony, and Viola's grandson Josh here with us tonight. Thank you. You all know, and I said this many times to you over the past few days, but your mother and your grandmother's sacrifice has truly inspired a new generation of activists to fight on her behalf and continue that flag. And I think many of them are here tonight, eager to learn from those who come before us and those who are contemporaries with us, like Morris Dees. So with that, I'd like to now recognize the great individual, Dean Robb, under whom this lecture is named. He is a proud alum of the law school, Wayne Law Class of 1949. And through his actions and unwavering integrity embodies everything that we hope to instill in our students as values and champions of the law. And of course, we have Dean Robb's son, Matt, about to graduate, a current law student here at the law school as well. So we're thrilled to have the Robb family here with us tonight, and to thank you for your continued support of the law school as a partner as we work together to seek justice for all. You are an inspiration to me and so many of us here. So with that, Mr. Robb, would you like to say a few words?
And then she's now on the board of the Southern Poverty Law Center and supportive of all the things we all believe in. Our big battle is still poverty, racism, and particularly the combination of both, and the justice system that puts so many of our brothers and sisters in jail improperly, felony records for kids. We got to stop this foolishness. Our country is not a Nazi-like prison country yet, but it soon will be if we don't stop this. So my message is to all of us, find a way to make that difference. We all know that we get those opportunities. And my test is say yes instead of no. Get out of your comfort zone. Let's save this great country. Make it what it's supposed to be. We know what that is, but we haven't reached there yet, that promised land. Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you, Dean Robb. So now it is a very unique pleasure of mine to introduce our speaker for this evening. As I think many of you may know, some of you may not know, I started my career at the Southern Poverty Law Center when I was in college. I learned of the many people who were killed in the civil rights movement and was indignant that I had not really been taught about them and their stories. I had only heard about some people's stories, but not everyone's stories. And in learning how much I didn't learn and was not told, I wanted to create a memorial as a young, plucky college student to all of those who had given their lives in the civil rights movement, only to learn that there already was a memorial, and it was at a place called the Southern Poverty Law Center. So with that, I decided that was where I wanted to work, and I packed up my belongings and drove to Alabama after my junior year of college, and was fortunate enough to be given the opportunity to work at the Southern Poverty Law Center at the young age of 19. Where I was able to do a great deal of work researching and helping, working with Morris, working with Richard Cohen and many other lawyers there to do research for cases and for the publication, the intelligence report. And it defined the rest of my career. Every moment I had down there learning about Viola Liuzzo, learning about her sacrifice, making a decision myself to become a lawyer, to continue the work that she would have championed had she lived and returned from Soma, becoming a voting rights advocate and all the rest. All started there at Southern Poverty Law Center in Montgomery, Alabama. So it's a very unique and distinct honor for me to welcome Morris now to Wayne Law tonight, and to say thank you personally, of course, for being the inspiration for my career and for being a great mentor and being willing to sit down with a 19-year-old and give me great advice over several dinners in Montgomery that you probably don't remember, but I do, and that helped inform me and give me guidance as I was trying to find my own way as a young, hopeful civil rights advocate. So it means a great deal to me personally to have you here, and of course now to be working with you again as a member of the board of your organization. So thank you, Morris, for joining us here tonight. Many of you know of Morris's story and how great and his many accomplishments are. I'll talk about them in a moment. But what I think to me really has inspired me most about Morris is that he seeks justice in every way and doesn't let anyone sort of distract him or tell him that you can't do this. You can't file that case because that's never been done before. You can't disclose this, you can't reveal this, you can't find this, you can't take down that organization because no one's done that before. You can't file this lawsuit or win on this claim because no one's ever done that before. Morris is the person who looks in the eye of that and says nothing is impossible and watch me win. And he wins every time. And he teaches us all how to win. What's also great about Morris is his story, and as I saw him talk to many of our students today over lunch, to be reminded of how Morris comes from humble beginnings, the son of cotton farmers, born in Shorter, Alabama in 1936, a young boy working the fields and witnessing firsthand social and economic deprivation and Jim Crow treatment at its worst. Through a series of situations where people came to Morris and said, "Can you help me?" and he said yes. That led to the creation of the Southern Poverty Law Center, where I think Morris just decided to help people full-time seek justice in every way possible. Early Southern Poverty Law Center cases included integrating the Alabama State Troopers and seeking justice for several victims of hate crimes throughout the South and ultimately throughout the country. The center has won millions of dollars of judgments against hate organizations based on its work. There really is no organization like it in the country doing civil rights work in a way that bankrupts hate organizations, that reveals hate crimes that are going on that otherwise would be unreported, and seeks justice for their victims even when other attempts to seek justice have failed. So it is an organization I'm proud to be affiliated with, and certainly led by a leader and a founder who is an icon and a role model for all of us. As was mentioned, Morris has been the recipient of a number of degrees and honors throughout his time, but what we're going to hear tonight, I think, are about Morris's true victories to seek justice for so many people who didn't have a voice, who couldn't afford attorneys to seek the justice that they had taken away from them, but who, like Dean Robb, Morris stepped up and sought justice on the behalf of so many families and so many people and so many citizens who've been wronged in so many ways. So Morris, thank you for joining us tonight, and please everyone join me in welcoming Morris to the stage.
inviting me here and Dean Robb to share this lecture in honor of the Liuzzo family. Your gain of Jocelyn is our loss. We would like to have had her to do more at the center than she did, and we made an offer, but she selected you instead, and so you're lucky. Gary over here, he's a homie. He's from Chandler Douglas, from town next door to where I live. My hayfield runs up against where you used to live, right? And just so glad to be here among people that I consider actual my heroes. Those are, first of all, those of you here at this auditorium who support the work of the Southern Poverty Law Center. I know many of you do, and we couldn't do it without you. And then people like Dean and Arthur Brown, who are certainly my heroes and have inspired me along the way. And I've always been able to say yes and I know when we call for help. You know, there are a lot of great lawyers who seek justice in this state and in this city. I don't know all of them. I know some of them. You know, this is the home of Ernie Goodman, who founded National Lawyers Guild, and his son, Bill Goodman, and his partner, Judith Horowitz, run a law firm in town. I know they're very dedicated to justice for helping those in police brutality and other cases. And his other son, Dick Goodman, and his partner, Katie Callahar, fight corporate greed that makes products that damage people's lives. So they continue that work. And there are so many more that I wish I could recognize all of you. I know you're here. And thank you, Mike and Carrie, for sponsoring this wonderful evening. Now, this event is partially responsible because of, the reason we're here is because of the Liuzzo family. Viola Liuzzo lost her life on a lonely country road in Alabama, where she was pursuing a higher road for justice for those who had few champions. And where her car that she was driving, where she was shot by a cowardly Klansman, finally rolled up beside a fence. It wasn't far from the cotton farm that I grew up in. And that was a country school there in that little rural community where I grew up. And I guess if I had a mentor early on, it would be a teacher at that school, a lady who taught my dad, she taught two of my sons, and she taught me. Before they closed that school, I think to get rid of Mrs. Viola Johnson. Wonderful lady. And she wanted us to grow up to be good citizens, to make something of ourselves. And she was only about 80s kids in that little school, and a lot of us in several grades in the same room. But there was two things that Mrs. Johnson said that we should not do if we're going to be good people. And that is that we could not smoke cigarettes, and we couldn't drink alcoholic beverages. I did great on the first one. And had you had her as a teacher, all this nation did, there would be no tobacco litigation because nobody would smoke. She was also my Sunday school teacher in that little Baptist church. And every day we had to repeat this rhyme, and I'm not kidding you, I was sitting there trying to be sure I had it right in my mind. We had to say that tobacco is a filthy weed, and from the devil does proceed. It empties your pockets, it burns your clothes, it makes a smokestack of your nose. But on this drinking thing, she was much more serious. She had a button about yipping around, and I'm sure she got it because she led the troops in that prohibition battle down here. And on this button it said, "Lips that touch wine shall not touch mine." And she I don't know, maybe. And one day, she was going on and on about with this temperance lesson, and contradiction in such a year. I'm 12 years old, I'm a lawyer to be. And I said, but Ms. Johnson, you told us last week that Jesus, in one of his miracles, turned water into wine. And she said, yes, Morris Dees. But we'd have thought a whole lot more of Jesus if he had done that. This dear lady, the other two teachers in that school would take us out in front of that schoolhouse, and we'd raise the flag, and we'd put our hands on our hearts, and we'd pledge allegiance. And I remember some of that pledge that sticks with me today. Words that she repeated in the class that we got back. There's very little that this dear lady could do about segregation in schools, but she did tell us she didn't think the black people were being treated fairly, called colored people back then. And those words that I remember was, one nation with liberty and justice for all. And that was little that I could do back then as a student. I was in high school, but it took a man after Rosa Parks, one of our neighbors, who didn't live far from where you live, down at Raymer, you know, high level, to refuse to give up her seat on a bus. And then the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King lived a life to put those values that we cherish so dearly into action. A man who faced many of his contemporaries who had little vision. A man who had to face politicians, many in Washington, D.C., that had little backbone. And finally, he had to face a terrorist with no conscience. You know, we recently celebrated the 50th anniversary of the Voting Rights March, and Dr. King's speech then, the theme of it was, how long? Not long. He might dare to say, he might say today, how much longer? And I'm thinking about those people who, like Viola Liuzzo and those people who made that civil rights movement a reality. It wasn't just Dr. King and John Lewis and Hosea Williams and so many more. It was those people who came, like Viola Liuzzo, from all over this nation. They came for Freedom Summer in Mississippi. They came as freedom riders on buses and they were beaten back. Goodman, Swearing Chaney died in Mississippi. Young people with a passion. Some from this town came also. Many came from this area, from this town. 10,000 children were jailed in Birmingham, Alabama, faced fire hoses and attack dogs, and finally brought that city to its knees. And the Voting Rights Act became law because the children and the school teachers in Selma, Alabama, long before Dr. King got there, who set the stage for what happened, and the death of Jimmy Lee Jackson, Reverend Reed, caused the President of the United States to sit down at the table. You know, Dr. King made a talk in 1963 in Washington, D.C., famous speech. And he said that there are lonely islands of poverty and injustice in this vast ocean of opportunity. Well, today, long after 1963, there are those among us who are finding little opportunity and no justice. If Dr. King was here with us today, he would tell you that the march for justice continues. You know the issues that face this nation. All you have to do, they're blazed out on the headlines of CNN as we watch an African-American man stop for a taillight that was out, gunned down like he would shoot a rabbit in the fields. With no life, no value for his life. All because of an attitude of racism in this country. And there's no other way to call it. There's much work to be done. Economic disparity. We know in the last 20 years, the top earners have had their income go up multiple percentages, and those in the lower quartiles have seen little or no gain. And if the minimum wage had kept up with inflation since I was in college, it would be over $15 an hour a day. And those people who are making millions and millions of dollars running the corporation of this country say that we should raise the minimum wage to a living wage. You know, you've got so many issues. Mass incarceration, Dean talked about it. We're locking up people in this country. We have a program that's been labeled the schoolhouse, the jailhouse, pipeline. We know what that is. Young people in my generation who've been sent home to your mama. Your mama would be called to school to talk to you now. They start in the juvenile hall where you start a lifetime of crime. Corporate greed in this country is rampant. The banks that we're supposed to trust, and some of them have trust in their names, bankless trust, are constantly fined millions of dollars for cheating people. All you have to do is pick up the paper, and they still advertise that you should put your trust with them and your money. The whole construction industry was brought to its knees because of greed at the top levels of our financial institutions. Healthcare, a serious issue in this nation, where those who have health care or somehow do not believe that those who are not like them should have health care also. Millions and millions of people are going without health care. And they put a label on it, Obamacare. Well, they thought that was because he has a name like Obama, which wasn't Bill or John Adams or Jimmy or somebody. Obama was a funny sounding name, so that's a good thing to label it. But you know, we really love our Social Security program. They don't call it Roosevelt Security. And we love Medicare. You could not get the Republicans to knock Medicare out because all their mamas on it. And they don't call that Johnson Care. So I hope that the name Obamacare sticks, because I think we've had enough of it, so people are not going to change it, but the battles are still being fought.
That's right.
In the LGBT community, we've seen enormous gains. President Obama was opposed to same-sex marriage less than 7 years ago, but now he's in favor of same-sex marriage, and we're seeing enormous gains, speeded up. And the issue that I want to talk about more tonight, though, is the whole issue of a changing America, immigration. Our state and many states passed laws to run Latinos out of this country, as well as others, but that was the target, people that have made this nation great. And I think the problem that's facing us now, and what we need, passionate people like Viola Liuzzo, like those children in Birmingham, like those individuals who caused the women in this nation to get the right to vote, who gave labor organizers what it took to break into corporations that had sweatshops and children working, the people that fought those battles, those who fought the battles in the civil rights movement, and so many battles that went before us, including abolition of slavery. We need those passionate people, young people and old, to take up the challenges that face us today. And this is what I think is causing the problem in our country, and that is fear. Fear of a changing America. Back when I was on that cotton farm in 1948, trying to figure out whether I should drink or not, 15% of the people in this nation were people of color. Today it's 37%. This town is 80%. America will look like this town, not quite, but by the year 2040, when people like myself and a lot of you will be in a minority. And that scares people in this country. People that have the money and the power and don't want to share what they have with people who are different than they are. They feel somehow entitled. And this crosses all the issues, not just immigration, the LGBT issue. Somehow it just scares these people to death. The two gay people decide they want to have a life together and get some legal ramifications around it so they can leave property and go visit them in the hospital to get sick and all that kind of stuff. That just scares these people because it's a changing America. The healthcare thing scares them to death because it's a changing America. And with that change, you have to have some priorities. Are we going to still spend our money over here? Or are we going to spend it over here? Are we going to buy more of these airplanes that shoot rockets out? Or are we going to buy more hospital equipment to take care of these people here? Are we going to send more people to medical school and give them a free ride on tuition? Or are we going to train more people to sit in a little cubicle somewhere and launch these rockets 5,000 miles away? There are some decisions that are going to have to be made. People are afraid of this change. In fact, when I grew up on that small cotton farm back in Alabama, and we didn't own any land, and fortunately for us, the white folks owned all the land except my daddy. And we had to rent from them, and I had to pick cotton alongside black people, and that was the best thing that ever happened to me. But I had a chance to know people who were different from me, but not really. I didn't understand what diversity was all about and the role it played in America and its history of our country until I had an opportunity to represent a group of immigrants. After the Vietnam War, several 100,000 Vietnamese were brought to this country. They had fought on the side of the United States, and had they been left behind, they would have probably been tortured, possibly killed, and certainly not helped. And so they were brought all over this country. Many came into this area, but about 50,000 were brought by the Catholic Relief Services to Galveston Bay, Texas, and the Houston area. And when they got there, these people who came literally with clothes on their backs went to work, hard work, like immigrants have done throughout the history of this nation. And it wasn't long before they'd taken over so many businesses, car wash businesses, mechanic businesses, fruit stands, restaurants. And a few of them decided, less than 50, that they wanted to get some shrimp boats and fishing boats and go out and fish in Galveston Bay. Well, they didn't have the money to buy these $200,000 and $300,000 trawlers that the American fishermen had. There were probably 600 or 700 of those boats, big boats, plying those waters all up and down there from Alabama to Texas. And so they bought old broken down boats. They put their little money together and bought these boats, $4,000 or $5,000, boats that basically weren't even seaworthy. And they fixed these boats up, and they repaired them, and they went out to fish. And it wasn't long before they were out fishing the American fishermen. And the only way to put it is that the American fishermen, just be honest, they were jealous. And so they went to the Texas legislature and said, "We want you to pass a law that will not allow these people to get fishing licenses for the next season." And the Texas legislature, in its wisdom, said, "We can't do that. This is a free enterprise country. These are our friends. We brought them here." And that didn't sit well with a group of American fishermen. They had an association. And so a few of them called on, actually, the world's longest continuing terrorist organization to come in to try to run the Vietnamese out, the Ku Klux Klan. In this case, it was the Texas Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. Well, they burned a couple of Vietnamese boats, and clearly they weren't burning their own boats, but they were sneaky and couldn't get caught. And they then burned a giant 50-foot cross down at Galveston Bay, in Kemah, Texas, where Clear Creek Channel comes out and the boats go out into the open waters of the Gulf of Mexico. And that frightened these fishermen. They knew about the Khmer Rouge and the terrorists in Cambodia and Vietnam, so they put their boats up for sailing. I got a call from a lawyer who did real estate work for them and asked if we might get help. I remember arriving down there and walking up and down the docks in Kemah, Texas, and with Nguyen Van Nam, the leader of the Vietnamese fishermen. These little boats were tied up along the dock, a lot of them, kind of rocking back and forth in the waters. And They had little glass wheelhouses. You see these old-fashioned boats, and in each window one, there was a little for sale sign, the kind of sign that you get from a hardware store. And I said, damn, you know, from what little investigation we've done, and the FBI was extremely helpful to us, giving us what they had about the leaders of this Klan group. And I said, I think we can bring a federal lawsuit. And the lawsuit would be to seek an injunction. You lawyers know, and maybe many of you do, that if you get an injunction for a court enjoining you from doing something, if you do it, you go to prison, criminal contempt of court. So we wanted to get an injunction to enjoin these Klan groups and a bunch of these Klansmen and a bunch of these American fishermen from not interfering with these people's right to fish. Well, we found some, he agreed, and the group agreed, and they signed on to the lawsuit, and we filed it. And it had to be a quick hearing because shrimping season was 2 weeks away. So we had to get a preliminary injunction and all that. And so we found some good evidence. We found some American fishermen didn't like what they had seen because they had become friends with these Vietnamese. They'd been in their homes, and they had allowed them to, you know, use their docks. And they knew they were good people. And so they were going to give us good evidence. One said the Klan came to me with an American fisherman and said, if you let Quang keep his boat at that dock, we'll burn your dock down. Just what we needed to go to court on. Well, we got prepared for the trial, and on a Sunday afternoon, before the trial started on Monday, I got a telephone call from Louis Van Dam. He said, Mr. Dees, we want you to drop the lawsuit. I said, oh, man, you can't drop the lawsuit, man. But if you don't want us to go, we have to tell the judge, I need to call today to tell the judge there won't be a trial. But I tell you, before you do this, tell me why you want to drop it. He said, because the leaders in the Vietnamese community says, let the Klan have the fishing. We don't want them coming out to the other businesses we have. I said, damn, you know, it don't work that way. If you cut and run now, you won't have any other businesses. They'll get the message real quick. You think that you could give me an opportunity to speak to Vietnamese leaders in this community and your fishermen tonight? Well, later that evening, there were about 150 Vietnamese people in a small Catholic church with a priest there to interpret. Stood before them, many of them in that room with the clothes they came to this country in, and sat very patiently listening. I said, you know, folks, America is a nation of laws. Laws that protect the minority against the majority if the majority is breaking the law. You know, don't drop your lawsuit. There have been people who've come before you who paid a dear price for fighting for their rights. The American Civil Rights Movement involved many people who died seeking their rights. And the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, you don't know about him, but let me tell you about him. He was an African-American minister, and black people didn't have the right to vote, or the right to go to good schools, or the right to buy houses where they wanted to. So many rights we all took for granted. But you know, Dr. King and his people continued and persevered, and continued to use the justice system. And had they not, they wouldn't have gotten their rights as soon as they did. I left, and there must have been a pretty contentious discussion, because I got a call about midnight, and Louis Van Dam said, continue the case. Well, we put on a good case. It lasted a week. Great testimony. Judge issued a very powerful, strong injunction naming 30 or 40 individuals and joining them from interfering with the Vietnamese fishermen. And Vietnamese were very happy and invited me to come down to the blessing of the fleet that next Monday morning. I got down there about, I guess it was probably, 5 o'clock in the morning. The sun had not come up. The fog was hanging heavy over the bay at Clear Creek Channel, where there was a dock where about 100 or so Vietnamese family members was sitting there waiting for the boat to come out. And the priest there to bless the boats. Didn't hear any boats until finally I heard a diesel engine chugging and popped out through the fog at the mouth of the channel and came out past the viewing stand, and the police preached, bless that boat, and another, until 15 or 20 boats had gone out into the open waters. The sun began to burn through the fog, and as I looked to my right, I could see the sun glistening off the badges of the United States Marshals that had been sent there, the police force of the court system, to enforce that court order. And as I looked around, I could see the faces, beaming faces, happiness of these family members who were watching their families becoming a part of the American dream. Finding a place at America's table. Not just finding a place at America's table, but building that table, so to speak, for the greatness of this nation. And I'll have to tell you, as I stood there on that early morning day in May, I felt not only proud to be their lawyer, but I felt proud to be an American, to see the majesty of our justice system at work. As I think today about the problems that face us, I think about how on that day I understood for the first time that our nation is great because of our diversity and not in spite of it. It's not just the diversity of race and creed and color, but sexual orientation and economic differences and so many other differences. The thing that's frightening our country today, that has our politicians so divided, they can agree on little or nothing. We're going to have an election coming up soon, a campaign, and you'll see all this drug out in front of you. And hopefully there are going to be young, passionate people who will take a stand. You know, I think that, I'm not sure what the solution is for us. I mean, it's not a simple thing. The back of the bus is not black. It's not easy to deal with the school systems, white versus black. They're all quite different today. So the issues are not simple, those issues, but there are a lot of other issues that are much less diverse and diffuse that we can work on. But I think what we really have to have before we can solve this problem is what South Africa had when Nelson Mandela was released. When Mandela sat down with de Klerk and they had reconciliation and forgiveness. And I don't think any case that I've ever handled, and the Southern Poverty Law Center has ever handled, that brought this home more. And some of you may have heard me tell this story before, but forgive me for repeating it. We represented a dear woman who lost her son to a Klansman's noose. Not just any Klan, it was a Klan group whose members killed Viola Liuzzo and the 4 girls that burned in the church burning in Birmingham, the United Klans of America. And this Klan group had become strong in the late 1970s because America was becoming more conservative and negative, and this Klan group was watching a trial down in Mobile, Alabama. A trial where a black man was on trial for killing a white police officer. And the Klan's national headquarters, they had chapters in 30 states, a new 10,000 square foot building and money in the bank. And they watched this trial and they saw that the jury that was picked to try this black man was 11 African Americans and 1 white. And so they sent word down to the local leaders in Mobile and said, if that jury does not convict, we want you to find a black person, any black person, and kill him in such a way that it will make jurors see and understand that if they're going to sit on trials affecting the rights of white people, they better be careful. And they got a gun and a knife and a rope and a car, and they gave it to two young Klansmen, James Knowles and Henry Hayes, and they all watched the trial, and these young men were going to carry out this deed if need be. The trial lasted a week or so, and at the end of the trial, it was a deadlock jury, and they thought this was a defeat. These two young men went out and found a young man about midnight, Michael Donald, Mrs. Donald's only son. And they found him walking down the street. He's coming from his job at Mobile Fresh. He was in a bricklaying school and junior college, and he was working at night, stuffing newspapers, and he was going home. Nice young man, a leader in his church. Took very good care of his mother and his sisters, and they pulled up beside him and asked him directions, and he didn't know it was a plan. He gave directions, and he got in the car and put a gun on him and frightened him. He didn't know what they wanted. He said, you know, take my money. I don't have much money. And he said, but don't kill me. My mama depends on me. They took him over in a bayous across the bridge from Mobile, and he jumped out and tried to run. They hit him with a stick several times, knocked him to the ground. Finally put the rope around his neck. And one Klansman put his foot up against the side of his face with boots on, and the other one the other side. And he pulled on that rope till there was little life left in him. Brought him back and hung him from a tree in downtown Mobile. Found the next morning. About 3 years later, they finally caught who did it. It's a long story. But the young Klansman, who was 17 at the time, ratted out on the older one. They gave him a life sentence in the Federal Witness Protection Program if he had testified against the older one. They had a trial, and I went to the trial as a lawyer for the Donald family, because as soon as we knew that two guys arrested with the United Klan, I'd been waiting for that opportunity to sue the group who bombed that church and killed Mrs. Liuzzo. And I had a theory that had never been tried. That was to sue that organization for the activist members. Well, I watched that trial, and I watched a young Klansman testify, and the jury convicted the older Klansman, and pretty much all white jury, they convicted him. He got the death penalty for that. Well, after the trial, I talked to the young Klansman, because I knew he didn't just go out and do this on his own. It was too complicated. And he agreed to help us, and the FBI allowed me to visit him in the Federal Witness Protection Program, and I just said in the FBI that he sued. Dees, there's a different one today. I mean, they were most helpful, and they just wanted to do everything they could. Well, we got the case up and filed a civil suit against the United Klans of America, and also they had a good lawyer, money and all. And we also sued some of the individual Klansmen. We sued James Knowles because we wanted all the people in the jury room. They had no money and no lawyers, but I wanted them there for the jury to see the whole cast of characters. We put the evidence on and had a trial that lasted about a week, and then Knowles got on the witness stand and tell how the older Klan leaders encouraged them to do this act. And I know that Mrs. Donald couldn't have ever have seen the waffle blueprints in that autopsy photograph of her son's face as I passed that exhibit over to the jury. At the end of the trial, I made my closing argument. I asked the jury to render a verdict so that one day when they call out the names of those men and women and children who lost their lives in the struggle for human rights and human dignity, render a verdict so they'd call out the name of Michael Donald. The Klan lawyer followed me, and he tried to distinguish his organization and their beliefs from these renegades over here, but the evidence is too powerful. I was fixing to get up to give a rebuttal argument when this young Klansman jumped to his feet. He'd been brought there by U.S. Marshals and federal prison. We didn't know what he was trying to do, but he said, you know, I didn't know that I could make a statement here. I don't have a lawyer, can I speak? And we all agreed he could, and he stood there, and he was about 25 by now, from 17. It took a long time to get to this trial. And he said, you know, ladies and gentlemen, everything that Mr. Dees said we did, and we did it in the direction of these Klan leaders over here. And I grew up with hate in my family. And now, because of that, I'm condemned. I'll Guess I'll die in prison. I'll never see my family again. He looked at Ms. Donald sitting there. She didn't come to the criminal trial. It was too painful, but she came to the civil trial. And she was sitting there in front of that jury, an all-white jury. And he looked at her and he began to sob. He just was sobbing uncontrollably when I thought the judge was going to grant a recess so that he could regain his composure. Cleared his throat and looked at her and said, Ms. Donald, could you find it in your heart to forgive me for what I did to Michael? And she kind of rocked back in her chair, looked at him there, and if I try 100 more cases, I don't think I'll ever be as moved. He said, son, I've already forgiven you. There wasn't a dry eye in that courtroom at our council table, and I saw that old judge rush back a tear. This dear woman who had lost one of the most precious things in her life had the love, the mercy, the understanding that this man also, this young man who committed this crime as a teenager, was also in many ways a victim. And she could reach out to him in front of that jury and in front of this nation with a forgiveness and a sense of reconciliation that we may talk so much about, but as nation has done little about. I thought that the words that came out of her mouth that night was a higher justice than that $7 million verdict that was rendered later by that jury. And that's probably one of the things that we're going to have to do as a country before we can bring ourselves back together and stop fighting these battles that mean little or nothing, and cease the fear that's driving wedges between us in this country. The young lawyers that go to this school, I talked to them today, and I can tell you they have a passion for justice, and as others do around this country, but they need an opportunity to practice that justice in a system that has a level playing field.
Amen.
You know, who knows what Martin Luther King would do or say today? He was still with us. But I think if he was with us today and he was making his famous speech, I have a dream speech, if I might be so bold to put words in this great American's mouth, he might say that I have a dream that in the red clay hills of Georgia, that the sons and daughters of former slaves and the sons and daughters of former slave owners, and today he might add, on the reservations, in the ghettos and the barrios, and in the seats of economic and political power, that these sons and daughters of former slaves and those who hold the keys to the economic and political power in this country will sit down around the table of personhood and truly learn to love one another.
Go!